My parents let my sister live in my investment property for free without asking me. Mom said she's struggling, unlike me. After 6 months of no rent, they saw a letter from the bank and finally understood why I wasn't worried. She needs a fresh start, Vanessa. You have to understand. My mother's voice crackled through the video call, that familiar mixture of pleading and guilt-tripping that made my stomach clench. Elaine's face filled my laptop screen, her expression a practiced blend of concern and manipulation I'd seen too many times before. I stood at my desk in my San Francisco office, the medical device prototypes I'd been working on pushed aside, staring at her image while trying to process what she'd just told me. The view of the Bay Bridge outside my window suddenly seemed very far away. Hazel needs this chance to rebuild her life. I watched my mother's face carefully, noting how she avoided direct eye contact, a telltale sign she knew she'd crossed a line. Apparently, my parents had given my sister, Hazel, permission to live in my investment property rent-free without even bothering to consult me first. And it didn't occur to either of you to ask me before handing over my property? I kept my voice steady and logical, though my grip on my stylus tightened until my knuckles whitened. It's my property, Mom. I purchased it with money from my patent royalties. This isn't some spare room in your house. Well, yes, but Hazel's going through such a difficult time since the breakup with that gallery owner. My mother's hands fluttered anxiously on screen. She has nowhere else that would nurture her creative spirit, and you're doing so well with your medical engineering career. Those devices you create help so many people. You don't even use the property, and Hazel could really make it special. I closed my eyes, counting silently to 10 while taking measured breaths, a technique I'd perfected during endless faculty meetings. At 32, I'd worked relentlessly to build my career as a medical device engineer, putting myself through graduate school with multiple jobs, saving every penny to invest in real estate while developing life-changing technologies. The Portland townhouse my sister had apparently moved into was my first major investment property, one I'd carefully renovated during weekends away from the lab, preparing to rent it out at market value to fund my next research projects. Besides, my mother continued with that particular lilt in her voice she used when she thought she was being reasonable. She's family. Family supports each other's dreams. Hazel's creative vision needs the right environment to flourish. The irony of those words made my chest tighten with a familiar ache. Where was this support family dreams attitude when I was struggling through engineering school, working 3 campus jobs, while Hazel dropped out of art school after our parents had paid her full tuition? Where was this support when I was eating ramen for months to save for my first patent application? How long has she been living there? I asked, dreading the answer but needing concrete information to formulate my response. Oh, just a few days, Elaine said, her voice brightening artificially. She moved in last weekend. Russell gave her the spare key you left with us for emergencies. She's already posted the most wonderful before and after pictures on Instagram. Her followers are absolutely loving what she's doing with the space. Of course he did. My father, always quick to enable Hazel's latest whim. The emergency key I'd trusted them with during my last research trip to Tokyo, now used to install my unemployed, aspiring designer sister in my investment property indefinitely. And when exactly were you planning to tell me that you'd given away my property? The edge in my voice was becoming harder to contain, the frustration building like pressure in a sealed chamber. Well, we're telling you now, honey. My mother's tone shifted to placating. And Hazel is just thriving there. She's already talking about creating an inspiration wall and repainting some rooms to, as she puts it, honor the creative energy of the space. You should see the color palette she's chosen. It's getting wonderful engagement on her design page. My stomach twisted into a tight knot. She's doing what to my property? Oh, nothing structurally significant. My mother backpedaled, clearly sensing my rising tension. Just some accent walls, and maybe a mural or two. You know how talented she is with visual aesthetics. Remember that phase when she wanted to be an interior designer? This could be her big break into the industry. Yes, I remembered. Just like I remembered her photography phase, her yoga instructor phase, her sustainable fashion boutique phase, and her organic juice bar phase. All expensive ventures funded by our parents that ultimately collapsed when Hazel lost interest or encountered the first hint of actual work. Mom, she can't just. Vanessa, please, my mother interrupted, her voice taking on that wounded quality that had always managed to make me feel like the villain. Can't you just help your sister find her path? She has real talent. She just needs the right showcase for it. She's family. I took another deep breath, my analytical mind already calculating variables and formulating a strategy. You're right, Mom. She is family. Oh, sweetheart. My mother's relief was palpable, her smile widening. I knew you'd understand. You've always been the practical one. Hazel will be so excited. She's planning to live stream her renovation process. It could really boost her follower count. Opening my laptop and pulling up my calendar while checking the time before my patent review meeting, I said, I have to go now. I'm presenting a new cardiac device prototype to the surgical team. After ending the call, I sat back in my ergonomic chair, a determined smile forming on my lips as I considered my options. What my family didn't know was that I'd been preparing for something like this for months. Ever since Hazel's latest relationship implosion, I'd observed her pattern of landing on her feet through family bailouts. I'd seen the way my parents' eyes turned to my stability, my success, my assets, always with that unspoken expectation that I should share the fruits of my labor with my struggling artistic sister. I opened my secure digital vault and pulled up a folder labeled Portland Property. Inside were documents I'd prepared with my intellectual property attorney, Clea, 6 months ago as a contingency plan. Legal notices, property regulations, and most importantly, the paperwork establishing the property's status as part of my corporate holdings. The townhouse wasn't just in my name anymore. It was now owned by VKM Innovations, LC, with strict legal protocols for occupancy and use. Any unauthorized residence could be considered trespassing under corporate property laws. I'd structured it this way specifically to protect my assets against family emergencies that seemed to occur with predictable regularity. My phone chimed with a WhatsApp notification from Hazel. "THX for letting me use this amazing space, sis. You're literally saving my life. BTW. Do you mind if I redo the kitchen? These cabinets are so basic. Thinking of a distressed turquoise finish that would be perfect for my YouTube channel launch. #creative space makeover." I didn't respond. Instead, I picked up my office phone and dialed Talia's number. Talia, it's Vanessa. Remember that contingency scenario we prepared for with the Portland property? It's happening. Yes, exactly as we anticipated. Can you initiate the monitoring protocol? I spent the next hour reviewing the legal framework with Talia, setting everything in motion methodically. The property management company would be notified, documentation protocols would be established, and the corporate oversight mechanisms would be activated. What about your parents? Talia asked, her voice carrying both professional concern and personal understanding. They're not going to be happy when they realize what's happening. They're not going to know until the appropriate time, I replied, feeling a mixture of resolve and sadness. Besides, they forfeited any right to an opinion when they distributed my emergency key without permission and violated my trust. My computer pinged with an email from Hazel, this one with attached mood boards and paint samples for what she called the Creative Haven transformation. All items that would undoubtedly be purchased with our parents' credit card. How long do you want to wait before initiating formal proceedings? Talia asked, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer. I thought about all the times I'd watched Hazel exploit our parents' generosity. All the times they'd expected me to understand, to accommodate, to give in because family supports family, but only in one direction. I thought about the 3 jobs I'd worked through college, while Hazel partied through her trust fund. I thought about the grants I'd written at 2M to fund my research, while my parents financed Hazel's 6th attempt at finding her true calling. Let's give it 6 months, I decided, feeling the weight of the decision but knowing it was necessary. Long enough for them to believe they've succeeded. Long enough for Hazel to fully document her unauthorized creative transformation of my property. Long enough for everyone to forget where the boundaries actually lie. And then? Talia asked quietly, though I could hear the understanding in her voice. And then we remind them exactly why you don't appropriate what isn't yours, even when you share the same DNA. I felt no pleasure in the decision, only a resigned determination to finally establish the boundaries that had been ignored for far too long. Weeks later, I spent the next few weeks methodically tracking Hazel's digital transformation of my property from afar. My screen became a window into her unauthorized remodeling project displayed for her growing audience. There she was, live streaming the installation of an antique crystal chandelier she'd found at some amazing little vintage shop, drilling into my dining room ceiling without permits or professional help. There were the daily Instagram stories about her creative rebirth and how sometimes the universe delivers exactly the canvas you need. Each image, every enthusiastic post, every unauthorized modification to my property was systematically captured, time-stamped, and archived in my documentation system. My parents initiated video calls regularly, carefully dancing around the subjects of actual ownership, instead lavishing praise on Hazel's artistic vision in revitalizing the space. They never once mentioned rent, utilities, or the legal implications of essentially gifting my property without my consent. Hazel is absolutely flourishing now, my mother gushed during one particularly grating video call, her face animated with pride as she sat beside my father in their Seattle home. She's really connecting with her authentic, creative self. Her follower count has nearly doubled. And it's all thanks to your generosity, Vanessa. I always knew beneath that analytical exterior was a sister who truly cares. I made non-committal responses while simultaneously adding another set of screenshots from Hazel's latest Transformation Tuesday post to my evidence file. She'd torn out the custom shelving I'd installed to create what she called a flow-focused, open-concept meditation corner. The digital folder was growing exponentially with evidence that would become instrumental in exactly 5 months and 3 weeks. Though, my mother added, her voice taking on that hesitant quality that always preceded an inappropriate request, Hazel was wondering if you might consider transferring the utilities to her name? Just to help her rebuild her credit after everything fell apart with that gallery owner. And also, she paused dramatically. She's thinking about adopting a rescue dog as her creative companion. The property allows pets, right? She's already picking out Instagram-worthy names. I muted my video call momentarily to release a sardonic laugh. Actually, Mom, I need to run. I'm presenting my new prosthetic valve design to the surgical team in 5 minutes. We'll continue this conversation later. That evening, I received a detailed digital report from my property management company confirming they had documented all alterations to the property since Hazel's unauthorized occupancy began. Every modification, every building code violation, every breach of the corporate property agreements, all meticulously recorded, photographed, and dated. My phone chimed with a WhatsApp message from Hazel. Hey sis, quick creative business question. Would it be cool if I list the guest room on Airbnb as an artist's retreat space? Thought I could host mini creativity workshops to generate some income while I'm building my design portfolio. Already created the listing draft. Just need your quick approval. I added the message to my evidence file and consulted my digital calendar, where the countdown timer showed precisely 5 months and 2 weeks remaining. This situation had evolved beyond a simple property dispute. This was about fundamental boundaries, mutual respect, and teaching my family that my professional success didn't transform me into their perpetual safety net. Sometimes the most compassionate action you can take for those you love is allowing them to experience the natural consequences of their choices. And in 5 months and 2 weeks, those consequences would arrive with mathematical precision. 5 months later, 5 months into Hazel's creative rebirth, my property management company delivered their comprehensive final assessment. The detailed report cataloged everything: unauthorized renovations totaling over $23,000, multiple serious building code violations resulting from her amateur improvements, and most alarmingly, evidence of the unauthorized Airbnb operation she'd been running from my guest rooms, marketed as the Creative Haven Retreat. I sat in my office, methodically reviewing the extensive photographic evidence and documentation while running my fingers through my hair in disbelief. Hazel had completely transformed my carefully renovated investment property into what she branded her bohemian sanctuary for authentic creation. The clean, modern walls I'd specifically chosen were now covered in chaotic murals and what she called intention manifestation mantras. The high-end, energy-efficient appliances I'd installed had been replaced with vintage models that matched her aesthetic vision. She'd sold my originals through Facebook Marketplace, according to her stories. And most disturbingly, the hardwood floors I'd personally refinished over 3 weekends were now covered in what she promoted as intuitive epoxy river designs that, according to the contractor's report, were improperly sealed and already showing signs of damage. My phone chimed with yet another message from Hazel. "Vanessa, you have to see how amazing the house looks now. Just hit 25K followers on my design account. Thinking of launching a full renovation coaching program. This could totally be my true calling. Already have 3 potential clients from my Airbnb workshops." I added the message to my evidence file and checked my calendar, feeling a complex mixture of determination and sadness. 2 weeks until the corporate audit I'd scheduled. 2 weeks until my family learned the difference between generosity and exploitation. "Are you certain about this timing?" Talia asked during our final strategy meeting, her expression showing both professional concern and personal understanding. "Your sister's Creative Haven launch party is literally the day after the formal notices are scheduled for delivery." I nodded decisively, recalling the digital invitation I'd received, complete with sponsored product placements and promises of content creation opportunities for attendees. Hazel was organizing an elaborate studio opening/networking event at my property, positioning herself as a design influencer on the rise. She'd already invited numerous industry contacts and hired caterers, all undoubtedly financed by our parents' credit cards. "The timing is precisely appropriate," I replied, feeling no satisfaction, only resolve. "Let them experience the full extent of their presumption. The contrast will make the legal reality more impactful." The evening before the scheduled audit, my mother initiated an urgent video call. "Vanessa, sweetie, you're definitely coming to Hazel's big launch party tomorrow, right? She's invested so much creative energy into the space. Everyone in her network is eager to see what she's accomplished with the property. She's been featured in 3 design blogs already. Actually, Mom, I have business in Portland tomorrow related to my investment properties. I'll stop by the event." "Oh, wonderful. Hazel will be thrilled. She keeps saying she wishes you would engage more with her content to see how she's transformed your unused investment property into a genuine creative sanctuary." my unused investment property, as if my deliberate renovation and rental plans were insignificant compared to Hazel's impulsive, artistic vision. By the way, my mother added, her voice taking on that particular tone that always preceded boundary violations, your father and I have been discussing this. And since Hazel has poured so much of herself into the space, perhaps we should consider transferring the deed to her? You're doing so well with your medical devices, and this would really help establish her design brand. Russell thinks it would be a wonderful gesture of support for her career. I gripped my phone tighter, feeling my pulse quicken. We can address all property matters tomorrow, Mom. That night, I boarded a flight to Portland, my tablet containing multiple digital copies of the corporate audit findings, legal notices, and comprehensive documentation of every unauthorized modification and violation. I also had access to the neighborhood association complaints regarding the constant stream of Airbnb guests, along with screenshots of Hazel's income from renting out rooms and hosting creativity workshops in a property she had no legal right to monetize. The morning of Hazel's launch party, I arrived at the property early for the official corporate inspection. The property management team and Talia were already there, alongside a licensed contractor and building inspector to formally assess the unpermitted renovations. The building code violations are extensive, the contractor said, shaking his head as he reviewed the changes. The amateur electrical work in what she's calling her creation studio is genuinely hazardous. The epoxy floors weren't properly ventilated or sealed. And most concerning, she's removed a load-bearing wall to create what she's calling a workshop flow space that significantly compromised the structural integrity. I documented everything methodically, then checked my watch. 3 hours until the official launch party was scheduled to begin. Right on cue, my phone lit up with a series of increasingly urgent messages from Hazel. Where are you? The catering team and the photographer are here. Need your help setting up the branded photo backdrop. Wait until you see what I did with your old home office. It's a manifestation meditation zone now, complete with a DIY waterfall feature. Followers are going to love it. The party. I forwarded the message to Talia, who added it to our comprehensive case file. The formal notices are prepared and ready, she confirmed, her professional demeanor unwavering. Would you prefer we deliver them during or after the event? This is your call, Vanessa. I considered my mother's presumptuous suggestion about transferring the deed, contemplated Hazel's entitled modifications to my property, and reflected on 6 months of watching them systematically exploit my professional success and goodwill. My decision crystallized with perfect clarity. During the event, I decided firmly, feeling no satisfaction but absolute certainty. Let them have their moment in the spotlight first. Let them thoroughly showcase everything they've done to my property for their audience. Then we'll clarify exactly who owns this house and why corporate ownership matters. The guests began arriving at 4 o'clock, a steady stream of influencers, designers, and local creative professionals, many carrying expensive cameras and recording equipment. From my position in the car across the street, I observed Hazel welcoming everyone with practiced enthusiasm, performing the role of visionary homeowner and design guru with remarkable conviction. Through the large bay windows, I could see my parents circulating proudly as she conducted animated tours, likely boasting about her creative transformation of the space while live streaming to her followers. At precisely 5:30 p.m., as the networking event reached its peak and Hazel was mid-presentation about her design philosophy, my property management team arrived with the official legal notices. I exited my vehicle, straightened my blazer, checked that my tablet was fully charged, and walked purposefully toward the house I had purchased with years of research, innovation, and careful financial planning. It was time to remind my family that sometimes the most valuable educational experiences are the ones you mistakenly believe would have no consequences. Vanessa, Hazel exclaimed when I entered, rushing toward me in a flowing designer outfit, her phone still recording for her Instagram story. "You're finally here. Isn't this space absolutely transformational? I've manifested something truly special here." Behind her, I noticed my parents' faces brighten with relief. They hadn't yet registered the team of professionals following me in, each carrying tablets and documentation folders. "Yes," I responded evenly, making sure my voice would carry throughout the now quieting room. "Let's discuss exactly what you've done with my property in detail." A sudden palpable tension filled the space as Talia stepped forward confidently, legal notices in hand. Hazel's kombucha glass halted midway to her lips as she finally processed the official-looking documents being placed on the reclaimed wood coffee table she'd proudly featured in her Upcycling Magic video series. The genuine confusion in her eyes slowly transformed into dawning comprehension. Sometimes the most effective boundary setting isn't about retribution, it's about standing firmly in your truth and allowing others to confront the natural consequences of their actions. As I observed the realization gradually spreading across my family members' faces, I knew this moment would permanently alter our relationship dynamics. The uncomfortable silence that enveloped the previously bustling event was absolute and revealing. Hazel's carefully manicured hand visibly trembled as she reluctantly picked up the top document from the stack. "What? What exactly is this?" she stammered, her eyes widening as they scanned the corporate letterhead, her live stream still running. "This," Talia stepped forward professionally, addressing both the physical and online audience, "is a formal notice of unauthorized occupancy and property violations issued by VKM Innovations LC, the legal owner of this property." "VKM Innovations?" My father interrupted, moving closer with confusion etched across his face. "Vanessa, what's happening here? What is this company?" I maintained my composed demeanor as event attendees began murmuring among themselves, some still recording the unfolding scene. "VKM Innovations is my corporate entity, Dad. The property was transferred to it 6 months ago, precisely when you decided to distribute my emergency key without consultation." My mother's face drained of color, her artistic scarf suddenly clutched tightly in her trembling hands. But that's just a legal technicality, right? This is still fundamentally your house." "No, Mom. This is a corporate asset, governed by corporate regulations and policies. Policies that have been systematically violated throughout the past 6 months of unauthorized occupation." Hazel's current boyfriend, a self-described creative entrepreneur she'd met at a digital nomad conference, attempted to intervene. "Hold up, this is clearly a family misunderstanding. You can't seriously be bringing all this corporate legal stuff into a creative space like this. That's totally against the spirit of artistic collaboration." Talia calmly extracted another document from her portfolio. "On the contrary, we're entirely serious. We have extensively documented evidence of multiple building code violations, unauthorized structural modifications, improper electrical installations, and perhaps most significantly, unauthorized commercial activity through Airbnb and paid workshop events." The crowd grew increasingly uncomfortable as the situation clarified. Several influencers discreetly stopped their recordings, while others continued, sensing viral contents unfolding. Hazel's hand lost its grip on her glass, which shattered dramatically against the improperly sealed epoxy floor she had proudly featured in her Weekend Warrior Transformation series. "Those were just creative retreats," she protested, her voice rising with panic. "Fellow artists staying over for collaborative projects. Artists who paid $250 per night, plus workshop fees, through your Creative Haven Retreat, Airbnb listing, and Eventbrite page." I inquired calmly, projecting screenshots from my tablet onto the wall-mounted TV she'd installed. The same listing where you explicitly advertise this corporate property as your personal designer studio space. My father stepped forward, his complexion flushing deeply. Now listen here, Vanessa. Your sister needed this opportunity to launch her career. We were simply trying to help her establish her brand. We were just. Just what exactly, Dad? I interjected, my voice remaining measured but firm. Just appropriating property that wasn't yours to give? Just enabling unauthorized renovations that have compromised the structural integrity of the building? Just overlooking the fact that Hazel has been operating an unlicensed commercial enterprise? The building inspector who'd assessed the property earlier stepped forward with his detailed report. Ms. Morrison, would you like me to elaborate on the code violations we've documented? The improper electrical wiring in particular presents significant safety concerns. Hazel's carefully applied makeup began streaming down her face with her tears. This is completely unfair. I've added incredible value to this place. Look at the aesthetic transformation. My followers love what I've done with it. I surveyed the surrounding improvements, the compromised load-bearing wall, the hazardous amateur wiring exposed behind her inspiration board, the improperly sealed epoxy floors already showing water damage. Value? You've created tens of thousands of dollars in damage and safety violations that will require professional remediation. Thousands? My mother whispered, clutching my father's arm for support. Talia nodded, presenting the detailed assessment. The preliminary estimate for bringing the property back to code compliance is approximately $45,000. That figure doesn't include addressing the unauthorized commercial rental income or the intellectual property violations involved in monetizing contents created in this space without the owner's consent. My father's face transitioned from deep red to an alarming purple. This is absolutely preposterous. You can't seriously do this to your own sister, your own family. Actually, I can. And more accurately, I'm not doing anything to her. I clarified, my voice steady. These are simply the natural consequences of her actions. Actions you actively facilitated and encouraged. The property manager stepped forward with additional documentation. We have comprehensive records of every unauthorized modification, every code violation, every commercial rental transaction, and every workshop event. We also have evidence of the original fixtures and appliances being sold through online marketplaces. Hazel's tears abruptly transformed into indignation. Those sterile appliances completely compromised the creative energy of the space. I replaced them with vintage pieces that have authentic character. Those sterile appliances were commercial-grade, energy-efficient models worth over $15,000, I replied evenly. Appliances you had absolutely no legal right to remove or sell for your personal profit. My mother grasped my arm desperately. Vanessa, please. We need to address this as a family. There's no necessity for all this formal legal intervention. Think about what this will do to your sister's emerging brand. I gently disengaged her grip from my arm. That's precisely where your assessment is flawed, Mom. This ceased being a family matter the moment you and Dad unilaterally decided to appropriate property that wasn't legally yours to distribute. The moment Hazel decided to treat my investment property as her personal branding opportunity and contents creation studio. But I needed this creative sanctuary. Hazel protested, her voice rising dramatically as her remaining audience captured the meltdown. After everything fell apart with the gallery situation, my followers were depending on my transformation content. Your need for creative sanctuary doesn't grant you entitlement to my property, I interrupted firmly. Your career disappointments don't confer the right to make unauthorized structural modifications, sell fixtures that don't belong to you, or operate an unlicensed commercial enterprise from a residence you're occupying without legal permission. The influencers and design professionals were quietly filing out. many still recording discreetly, leaving behind half-consumed artisanal beverages and untouched charcuterie boards. Hazel's entrepreneurial boyfriend had conveniently vanished, along with most of her industry connections. Talia cleared her throat professionally. According to our comprehensive documentation, Ms. Hazel Morrison has generated approximately $22,000 through unauthorized short-term rentals, workshop fees, and sponsored content created within this corporate property. This income, combined with the proceeds from selling corporate assets through various online marketplaces, will need to be fully repaid. Hazel collapsed dramatically onto her vintage-inspired daybed that she'd featured in 3 separate, budget-friendly luxury posts. I don't have those kinds of resources. Every dollar went into elevating this space. The materials, the vintage finds, the staging props for content's creation. Elevating? I couldn't help but release a short, incredulous laugh. You mean systematically damaging? Every modification you implemented without authorization, every structural alteration conducted without proper permits, every violation of building safety codes. All of it is thoroughly documented, and all of it requires professional remediation. My father made one final attempt, his engineering background suddenly evident in his approach. Vanessa, you need to consider the practical implications here. What exactly do you expect your sister to do now? Where will she continue her work? Where is she supposed to live? I met his gaze directly, unmoved. That's not my responsibility to resolve, Dad. Just as it wasn't your property to redistribute without consultation. Hazel has precisely 30 days to completely vacate the premises and initiate repayment for the damages and unauthorized commercial income. 30 days? My mother exclaimed, her artistic sensibilities clearly offended by such concrete timelines. But her entire creative life is established here. All her content's creation equipment, her design materials. She established that creative life using misappropriated property, Talia interjected matter-of-factly. The 30-day time frame is actually quite generous. Considering the extent of the violations and commercial activity, we could legally demand immediate vacation of the premises. Hazel leapt to her feet, her carefully curated bohemian composure completely shattered. You absolutely cannot do this. Mom. Dad. Tell her she can't legally do this to me. My whole brand depends on this space. I observed my parents exchange helpless glances, the realization finally dawning that their usual manipulation tactics held no power in this situation. Their casual dismissal of my property rights, their entitled assumption that Hazel's creative ambitions superseded my legal ownership. All of it was disintegrating before their eyes. The property will be professionally restored to its original condition, I continued with clinical precision. Any restoration costs not covered by the repayment of the unauthorized rental and workshop income will be your financial responsibility, Hazel. And yes, we are fully prepared to pursue appropriate legal action if necessary. Legal action? My mother whispered, clutching her designer scarf. You would actually sue your own sister? Your own blood? You mean similar to how you attempted to manipulate me into transferring the deed to her? I counted evenly. Yes, Mom. I overheard your suggestion earlier about helping establish her design brand. Consider this my formal response to that proposition. The property manager distributed final copies of the legal notices to all relevant parties. All future communication regarding this matter must now be directed through our legal department. Any attempts to further modify the property or continue unauthorized commercial activities will result in immediate legal escalation. I turned to leave the chaotic scene, then paused deliberately. Oh, and Hazel, congratulations on your studio launch. Consider this your first lesson in the business realities of design and property law. Sometimes the most valuable gifts are the lessons we never anticipated receiving. As I walked out of the house, My property. I registered Hazel's dramatic sobs, my mother's emotional pleading, and my father's angry technical objections echoing behind me. But for the first time in months, I experienced a profound sense of clarity. Sometimes establishing necessary boundaries requires accepting the role of antagonist in someone else's narrative. But I'd rather be perceived as the villain than continue as the silent enabler they had come to expect. Let them label me cold. Let them portray me as the heartless engineer sister who wouldn't sacrifice her assets for family creative dreams. I understood the deeper truth. Sometimes the most compassionate action you can take for family members is allowing them to experience the natural consequences of their decisions. 6 months later, 6 months after Hazel's disastrous studio launch party, I stood in my fully restored Portland property, methodically evaluating the transformation. The walls had been returned to their original architectural finish. The compromised load-bearing wall had been professionally reinstalled according to code, and new energy-efficient commercial-grade appliances gleamed in the kitchen. Every repair had been meticulously documented, every code violation properly addressed, and every trace of Hazel's creative vision remediated. The final restoration costs had totaled $67,000, substantially exceeding the initial estimate once contractors discovered the full extent of the structural and electrical damage concealed behind decorative elements. After extensive negotiations through our respective legal representatives, Hazel had finally agreed to a structured repayment plan, utilizing her portion of our grandparents' trust fund to cover the damages and unauthorized commercial income. My phone illuminated with a WhatsApp notification from her, the first direct communication we'd exchanged in months. Can we meet in person? No attorneys, no drama, just sisters. I have something important to show you. I considered ignoring the message, but something within my perspective had evolved over the intervening months. I responded simply, coffee tomorrow, 10 o'clock. The independent cafe across from my property. When I arrived at the coffee shop the following morning, I momentarily failed to recognize my sister. Gone were the flowing bohemian garments and carefully curated creative entrepreneur aesthetic. Instead, Hazel sat at a corner table in professional attire, a laptop and portfolio open before her, her expression focused and grounded. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she said quietly, as I settled into the chair opposite her. "I've been doing some extensive reflection and reassessment of my choices." "Oh?" I maintained a neutral expression, observing the detailed spreadsheets and design portfolio displayed on her screen, noting the meticulous organization that was previously absent from her work. "You were absolutely right," she acknowledged, her directness genuinely surprising me. "About everything." I completely exploited the situation. I made the entitled assumption that because you had achieved professional success, because we share DNA, I somehow had an inherent right to your property. I failed to respect what you built through years of hard work and planning. I took a measured sip of my coffee, giving her space to continue while processing this unexpected self-awareness. "These past months have been profoundly educational," she continued, her voice lacking its former performative quality. "Living with mom and dad again, actually having to create and maintain a realistic budget, facing genuine consequences for my actions." She released a soft, self-deprecating laugh that contained no trace of her previous social media persona. "It turns out I'm not nearly as helpless or as purely creative as everyone believed, as I believed." She rotated her laptop to face me directly. On the screen was a comprehensive business plan for a legitimate home staging and design consultancy, complete with market analysis and financial projections. Remember all those times I talked about interior design as my calling, but never actually pursued it professionally? I'm approaching it properly this time. I've enrolled in accredited certification courses. I'm studying business fundamentals. Developing a sustainable business model with realistic growth projections. No shortcuts, no family bailouts, no instant gratification. And how are you handling the financial aspects? I inquired, genuinely interested in her approach. I'm starting at the foundation level, utilizing the skills I actually possess, methodically building a legitimate portfolio with documented before and after results, she explained with newfound pragmatism. Once I've established a proven track record with measurable outcomes, I plan to apply for a proper small business loan with a complete business plan. No more dependence on family resources, or, she paused, meeting my eyes directly, or appropriating what doesn't belong to me. For the first time in perhaps a decade, I truly saw my sister as she could be. Not the entitled content creator who had commandeered my property, but the capable, determined person emerging when finally confronted with accountability. Mom and Dad aren't particularly supportive of this approach, she admitted candidly. They wanted me to contest the repayment plan, to emotionally manipulate you into withdrawing the legal requirements. But I refused. I genuinely needed this wake-up call. And frankly, we all did. She removed a check from her portfolio. This represents the first official installment. I understand it's being processed formally through the legal channels, but I wanted to present it to you personally, as tangible evidence of my commitment. I examined the check thoughtfully, then looked back at my sister, recognizing the authentic effort behind the gesture. Keep this one, I decided. Redirect it toward your certification program instead. Her eyes widened with genuine surprise. But the established repayment schedule remains in effect, I clarified immediately. But this particular payment, consider it an investment in your professional development. A legitimate investment this time, with clearly defined parameters. Tears gathered in her eyes, but unlike the performative emotion I'd grown accustomed to, these appeared genuinely reflective. I'm truly sorry, Vanessa. For everything. I know words aren't sufficient. We sat in unexpectedly comfortable silence for several moments before she continued. Dad's selling his collection of high-end electronics to help cover the restoration costs. He acknowledged it's the minimum he can do, considering he violated your trust by distributing your emergency key. And Mom, she's actually attending sessions with a therapist who specializes in family dynamics and enabling behaviors. I raised an eyebrow, unable to fully mask my surprise at this significant development. Your willingness to establish concrete boundaries didn't just force me to confront reality, Hazel explained thoughtfully. It compelled all of us to examine our dysfunctional patterns, how we exploited your success, how we justified our entitlement through the convenient shield of family obligations. She gathered her materials methodically, preparing to attend her certification session. I'm not requesting immediate forgiveness. I understand that trust requires rebuilding through consistent actions. But I wanted you to know, your decision was absolutely necessary, even when it felt harsh in the moment. You took the action none of us had the courage to initiate. You disrupted patterns that would have continued indefinitely. After she departed, I walked slowly back to my restored property, contemplating our conversation. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the spotless windows, illuminating the professionally restored spaces. But perhaps, I realized, the most significant restoration extended beyond the physical property itself. That evening, my tablet notified me of an email from my father. The subject line simply stated, "Formal apology and commitment to amends." Dear Vanessa, it began, in a tone I barely recognized from him. I've listed my entire electronics collection and several other assets for sale, not because Hazel suggested it, but because I need to take concrete responsibility for my actions. I betrayed your trust by distributing your emergency key without permission, and then compounded that violation by attempting to defend the indefensible. You deserve more respect from your father than I demonstrated. I archived the message. noting the striking difference from his typically defensive technical justifications. Meaningful change, it appeared, became possible when people were required to face the natural consequences of their choices. The following day, my property manager forwarded the final restoration documentation and photographs. Examining them, I experienced a moment of profound clarity. This situation had never been merely about protecting a financial investment. It had been about establishing essential boundaries, commanding fundamental respect, and making the difficult decision to prioritize principles over temporary harmony. The property was secured again, legally and physically mine. But more significantly, my family was beginning to respect not just my ownership rights, but my fundamental right to establish and maintain appropriate boundaries. Sometimes the most valuable gift you can offer family members is the opportunity to mature emotionally, even when that opportunity arrives wrapped in legal documentation and difficult lessons. And sometimes the most enduring foundations are constructed not through endless accommodation, but through clearly defined boundaries and earned mutual respect. Standing in my fully restored property, I allowed myself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The structural elements weren't merely repaired, they were reinforced. And so was I.